In this lecture, we're going to begin configuring Babel with Webpack. After installing the necessary packages, we can start using Babel as a loader. We're going to use Babel to help Webpack with processing JavaScript files. Babel will make sure that any code we write using the latest features of JavaScript will be backward compatible. We are allowed to use loaders for the JavaScript portion of our application as well. Since Babel and Webpack are not connected by default, we need to use a loader to bridge the gap. The Babel loader module we installed earlier makes it easy to integrate Babel with Webpack. All we have to do is update our config file to use this module. Inside the config file, create a new property called module. The module property allows us to configure third-party modules. It's where we need to add our loaders. Keep in mind that Babel is technically a module. If we want to load the Babel module, we have to add it to this property. Webpack will take care of loading it for you. The value of this property will be an object which will contain even more properties about how modules work with Webpack. We're going to add one property to this object called rules. We want the Babel loader module to be used for JavaScript files. We can restrict which files Babel will process by setting some rules. Webpack will go through every file that's loaded from the entry point. For every file it finds, it'll apply the rules to those files. If a file passes a rule, the module attached to the rule will be applied to the file. We want to create a rule that, if the file is a JavaScript file, we want it to go through Babel. To create a rule, we need to pass in an object in the array. Inside this object, we'll set a property called test and assign it to a regular expression. The regular expression will be the following: //.js%. The test property will run against the name of the file. We need to set this to a regular expression. If the test passes, this rule will pass. The rule we're using is checking if the file ends in a .js extension. It's an easy way to verify if the file is a JavaScript file. It also prevents Babel from processing CSS and image files. On top of testing, if the file is a JavaScript file, we'll need to make sure that we don't process the same file. For example, we have the node modules directory. The files in there can contain JavaScript too. However, we don't want to process those files because it'll slow us down, and it's not our responsibility anyway. We can prevent this rule from applying to files found in this directory by using the exclude property. This property will be set to the following expression: /left parentheses node underscore modules right parentheses /. This property should prevent Babel from processing files in the node modules directory. If everything passes, let's tell Webpack to use Babel. We will add one more property called use. The value for this property will be the name of the module, which is Babel loader. This property will tell Webpack what loader to use. The Babel loader module will bridge the gap between Webpack and Babel. That's all we need to do on Webpack's side. We're not done yet. We need to create a file called .babelrc. Babel needs to be configured itself. We can't do that through Webpack. Babel can be configured by creating a file in our project called .babelrc. It's very important that we call it this. There is no file extension. It's just .babelrc. It's the configuration file Babel will look for when it's compiling our code. Inside this file, we can configure how Babel works. We have to create an object. We need to tell Babel the presets we'd like to use. As a reminder, presets are the features we'd like to enable in the JavaScript language. The property we're going to add is called presets. The value for this property is an array of modules that contain the rules on how to modify the output of JavaScript. We'll set this to @babel/preset-env. Babel will load the modules we add to this array. The Babel preset env module contains a list of rules for converting JavaScript syntax into older syntax. It's code that browsers will be able to understand even if we're using features that aren't available on them. We must make one distinction between these two files. The Webpack config files allow us to control how Webpack works. The module property allows us to bridge the gap between Webpack and a third-party module. However, it does not entirely control that module. Babel needs a separate configuration file. Through this file, we can specify how it'll work. Alright, that's it. Let's test things out. I'm going to run the npm run start command. We won't receive any errors in the console. Let's view the HTML file in the browser again. The page is loading without a problem. In the console of the developer tools, the messages from both files are getting outputted. We've successfully integrated Babel into our project by using loaders. Loaders allow us to process the code that Webpack doesn't know how to process. It also allows us to process code outside of JavaScript like CSS or HTML. Babel enables us to write code with the latest JavaScript syntax. It'll compile your code to be backward compatible with older browsers. We will continue our Webpack journey in the next lecture.